So we're recording. Welcome everybody to this webinar. My name is Edwige Simon and I'm the director of the Graduate Certificate in Language Teaching with Technology. And I'm just going to say a few words about our summer courses. This is our website. The URL is colorado.edu/language technology program in one word. The program has been around for 2 years. It is a fully online program just for world language educators. And it is focused on technology integration in the language classroom. And we are offering courses year-round. We have about 19 credits worth of courses. And world language educators can just take one course if they're interested in one particular topic, like the gaming course, for example, or they can go and complete the 12 credits required to obtain the certificate. A certificate is not, it's about half a master's program. I've heard it called a mini master's, but it's technically not a master's program. It's more of it's a credentials. It's certificates or programs designed for people who usually are professionals and they want to acquire a specialization in a particular area. Our area with the program is technology integration in the language classroom, which means that we talk about a wide range of topics in all of our courses. And this summer, we will be offering 4 courses. The first course that we'll be offering this summer, and I'm going to move my screen up a little bit. Our first summer course, I'm going to go to this slide. It is a course on second language acquisition. And this course is pretty much full by now. I think we have 2 spots left, and it starts June 3rd. And it is an SLA course for in-service world language educators. What that means is that we read the theory. Well, you read the theory because I'm not teaching the course. But you read a text per week and then you discuss it with your instructors and your peers. And you really talk about how the theory relates to your classroom practices. Is what the theory about second language acquisition says, is it consistent with what you do in your classroom? Is it not? It's a very interesting course because everybody has a different teaching approach. So last year there were teachers, TPRS teachers taking the course, so they were teachers coming from very different backgrounds, and so it's just very interesting to connect the theory, especially the latest theory, to our classroom practices. So it's a 10-week course and it starts June 3rd. Today really is the last day to register for the course if you want to have access to it on time. And then the next course we'll be teaching, offering is the Language and Technology Foundation course. I need to remove this S. And that's a 10-week course that starts June 17th. And that's the foundation course. This course is required if you want to get the certificate. And it's a great course. And I just finished building a course page for it. I'm little by little building one individual page per course. So right now we have one individual page discussing the SLA course, and I just finished building the course page for the foundation course. And so if you go to the course page, you'll be able to scroll down and take a look at a little bio, some comments from students who took the course in the past, a typical course structure, and the learning objectives, and also the weekly topics. And if you look at the weekly topics for this course, we start with an overview of the field of language technology. We discuss how to create a personal learning network, how to stay on top, because it's so overwhelming and it moves so quickly. We discuss the 21st century classroom. We discuss the SAMR model. We talk about Voicethread. We do lesson planning with Voicethread. We talk about assessment and feedback. We talk about the importance of using proper terminology when we talk about technology and why that's important. We talk about copyrights, intellectual property, fair use, ADA compliance, universal design, and finally, we kind of go back to the overarching theme of the course, which is, will technology replace the language teacher? That question, last time we taught the course and the discussion board exploded. Everybody had a lot of things to say, but we really take a good look at that question. I found this graphic yesterday online from 1961 that says, will robots teach your children? So you know, we've been talking about this for a while. It's not a new question, but the answers are different. So that's the foundation course. It's a great course. There are about 6 or 7 spots left in that course. And then I'm teaching a gaming course. That's an 8-week course that's entirely dedicated to digital games and language learning. And finally, there's a 1 credit hour course for language teachers who need to brush up on the target language themselves, because they're rusty, because they might be the only language teacher in their district, because they maybe rarely have a chance to practice Spanish past, you know, Spanish 1 or 2. Maybe they don't have a chance to teach AP Spanish. There are many reasons why language teachers might need to brush up on their command of the target language. And so in this course, they get paired up with a language partner, and they just decide for themselves what they will be discussing during their weekly session with their language partner. So with that, I'm going to stop talking about the program. If you visit the website, you'll see that there's a ton of information about the courses, a lot of information about also the next webinar that we'll be offering. It's also a certificate student who will be presenting on a capstone project that she designed. And if you have any questions, you can just email me and I will answer them in a very timely fashion.
Welcome all of you, and thank you so much for attending. Alondra and I know how hard it is to find an hour free at any time of the school year, especially now when it's crunch time at the end of the year and you're writing finals or you're grading them. And so we really hope that the time you spend with us today will be worth it and that you'll feel that it was time well spent. So we would like to introduce ourselves. I am Margot, and I'm presenting with Alondra. Our credentials are on the screen. Alondra, in addition to being department head at her community college in Williamsburg, Virginia, is also teaching a variety of Spanish courses in both the traditional format and online as well. I worked for many years at Harvard Westlake School in Los Angeles. I was also department head and Spanish teacher, and I'm currently in Germany for a couple of years. I'm doing work in the graduate certificate program, and I'm taking intensive German. So, Alondra and I met in January of this year. We're both certificate students. We were enrolled in a course called Tools in Practice, obviously technology tools in practice. And you've already got information about the program from Edwige, and there's a link here if you'd like to learn more about the program. And today's presentation is a description of the project that we designed together and that Alondra's students did on the theme of beauty and aesthetics. This tip, so it's called our Technology Integration Project, but we usually refer to it just as TIP, is the culmination of the tools course. And we collaborated because of the fact that I'm not currently teaching students, and so I could design a project, but I wouldn't have had a partner. I mean, I wouldn't have had students on whom to try the project out. So I needed to have a partner with whom to work. And luckily, the certificate program is flexible enough to allow that kind of collaboration. So we're sharing with you our whole document. As you can see from the table of contents, and all of these links take you right to the specific section of the document. So by attending the webinar today, you're going to hear a lot of what's in the whole thing. But if you decide you really like the project and you want to implement this with your students, then probably what makes most sense for you is to go directly to the project lesson plan later on. And that's the part that you could modify or refer to. And then at the very end, even beyond the final report here at the end, there's a list of can-do statements and the rubric that Alondra and I use to grade the students on their final presentational report. This link here takes you to the whole document. It's pretty long. It has a lot of detail, but you might not need all of it. Okay, so we're going to tell you about the project. This screen is sort of a summary of the topic, Diego Rivera's Detroit Industry Murals at the Detroit Institute of Arts. Here's the AP theme and the 21st century theme, and here are the essential questions. Just so you know, Alondra's students who did this project are second semester, first year community college students. So they had studied the preterite and they were beginning to study the imperfect. We think that they're still at around the novice, maybe novice high level of between novice mid and novice high level of language proficiency. So that means that I think you could use this topic in high school classes as well, from a level 2 or level 2 honors on. Depending on your group and the interest level and the time you have, you might want to make modifications to it, but we think that it could be used at high school as well. Edwige asks us to, in these projects, to connect them to the ACTFL standards and to the 21st century skills. So we figured that our topic was aligned to communication in that the students were interpreting murals and then making presentations about a mural that they chose on Voicethread. We'll talk more about that in a few minutes. Because they were studying murals as an educational tool in post-revolutionary Mexico, we figured that we were aligned to the culture standards of the ACTFL model, and then obviously because they were studying art, that took care of connections. And the 21st century skills that we figured our topic most aligned with are here. We know that every school embraces something a little bit different. For example, we don't have the Common Core addressed here, but we tried to think of as many different standards as possible to, in order to help people justify using a project like this. As we did research, we read articles about the Detroit industry murals, because even though we both know and love Diego Rivera's work, it had been a while since we had read a lot about them. So we read these 4 articles, and there are summaries of them in the lit review portion of our document. So if you wanted to learn the main ideas that were in these articles, you could do so without reading the articles themselves. And here's a list of the tech tools that we used in this project. So obviously we needed to find images online from the Detroit Institute of Arts, but also we wanted to find a way to make the students connect with murals and not just think of it as something that happened in Mexico at a certain period of the 20th century. Now remember that Alondra is located in Williamsburg, Virginia. So we discovered that there's a project called the Richmond Mural Project. It's an annual event that's giving tourists and artists another reason to visit Virginia every year. And there's some really beautiful and striking murals around Richmond, almost right in the students' backyard, that they never knew existed. And I highly encourage you, if you decide to use this project or to do some adaptation of it, to look around in your own community, because it's probable that there are some murals around not too far from you that might really engage the students and make them excited, more excited about the project than they would be otherwise. I think everybody's probably pretty familiar with PowerPoint and Google Slides. You may be less familiar with Padlet, and Voicethread. Padlet and Voicethread are nice complementary tools. They're both web-based. Padlet is free and Voicethread is not, so that's one big difference. Padlet is an online chat tool similar to a virtual whiteboard, and you'll see later on how our students used it. When they were discussing questions, they answered the questions on Padlet, and it was a way for them to share thoughts in a way that they could see, almost everyone's thoughts at once. And then once they got past that and they were actually doing an individual project on their own or with a partner, they recorded a description and analysis of a mural that they chose on Voicethread. And Voicethread, if you don't know it, is a media aggregator. So you can upload pictures or videos or slide presentations or documents, and then record something about them in a variety of different recording formats, audio, visual, and then anybody who has the link can comment on the work that you've done. So it's a really nice way, it's asynchronous, and it's a really nice way for you to show your work to a community and get community feedback. And finally, we used Google Docs in a variety of different ways, but mainly to create a main class document. And I'm going to show this main class document to you now. So here, Alondra's students uploaded their presentations, their Voicethreads, and their Google Slides presentations, because part of what they had to do was comment on the work of 2 of their classmates. And this just made it really easy for them to find their classmates' work. This main class document is an idea that we stole from Edwige, because in her courses, she always has a main class document, because for the same reason, we have to comment on each other's work. So that's what that looks like. And now we're going to tell you about the process that we followed. In one sentence, our students had to choose a mural and do an analysis of it and give their opinion of it and upload that to Voicethread. So you have, in 25 words or less, that's what they did. But we started by having them look at some of those murals from Richmond, and we gave them some information about the Mexican mural movement. And so we've included in the presentation the Google Slides that we showed to the students, which include pictures of the Richmond murals. And these two links here, the Google Slides and the Voicethread, are the same content. So if you don't have a Voicethread subscription, you're getting all the same information here in the Google Slides. But we wanted to show the students what Voicethread looks like. So we had this to show them on the first day. And then once they had some information, background information on murals, and they were starting to think about them, we broke them up into groups of 3 or 4, and they started to discuss what they were seeing in the murals. I'm going to show you the student handout in a minute. And then after that, they started to work on their project. So I'm going to take you to the student handout, which you'll also have. There it is. Okay. So they had the overarching theme and the essential questions, the project goals. And then we did some very basic activities where we had them just look at the murals and try to attune their eyes to be able to read them a little bit. So we just wanted them to look at certain images. And then we included a visual thinking routine. So this is see, think, wonder. What do you see? What can you identify? What questions do you have after looking at the mural? And then the next activity kind of builds on this very first one here. They weren't just looking at murals anymore, but here in this next activity, we wanted them to find certain people or elements in the mural. So can you find the worker wearing a gas mask, for example? And this is another way for them to kind of train their eyes to read the murals a little bit. Then they broke up into their small groups, and they discussed and they entered answers to these questions, these conversation questions on Padlet. And then they were ready to start their project. So they had a lot of agency in what they did. They were able to decide if they would work alone or with a partner. They were able to pick their own artist, someone that interested them, and a mural or a piece of artwork that artist had created. So those are the choices they had, and we gave them some help. If they didn't know where to start, we gave them some ideas down here. And then what they had to do after they made all those choices about whether they would work alone or not, and which artist they would choose and what piece of artwork, they had to prepare their presentation with a Google Slides presentation in which they told us about the artist, a brief history of that artist's life and times, and some information about the mural or the piece of artwork that they chose. I think most of them chose murals, giving their opinion about it and some basic analysis, and responding to the essential questions that are at the beginning of this document. They had to upload all that to Google Slides and then to Voicethread and narrate their information to Voicethread, the information about the artist and all that whole story about their mural. And the nice thing about Voicethread is that you can record once or twice or 50 times if you want, until it's really the way you want it. So students have a chance to really make it presentational and to do the best job they can. And finally, they put the links to their presentations in that main class document I showed you. And the final part of what they had to do was to make comments on the work of 2 of their classmates. So all that is available to you to use and adapt however you might want to. And I'm going to go back to our presentation. And Alondra is going to take over now with the examples of students' work. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen at this point. Ready, Alondra?
All right, so let's see here. All right, let's see here. So here you will have, here you'll see some examples of the students' work. And this first slide that you will see is an example of Padlet. So Padlet allows you to post comments asynchronously, but the good thing is that it updates automatically. So it's really live updates. So anything that students post come in real time, so students can have an actual interaction and communicate among each other in real time. So as you saw from the student handout, we had a different Padlet link for each question. So we had one for each of the essential questions, and then one specific one for each of the questions that we asked about the Diego Rivera murals from the Detroit Institute. So here you will see the essential question, why is art necessary? One of the students said, Tamara, art is important because it gives a voice to people that don't have a one. And Andy said, I think art is necessary because it's the best way to express oneself. Art can change what people think and feel. So you can see just from those two examples that they really thought critically about these answers, and this project really forced them or challenged them to think critically throughout the entire project. The next slide that you will see here is just a Google slide from Tamara's Google Slides show that she prepared. And you will see in this one, so she chose a mural by Frida Kahlo, but all of the slides were so vivid and so full of color and filled with information. And in this slide and the other ones you'll see, you will note, especially if you teach Spanish, if not, I'll point out to you, their grammar is by no means perfect, but they were still able to convey their message and get their point across. And it was really communication and without perfection, but they still were able to do it. The other thing I want you, so you can see from that one and the other ones, is that you will see in all of these that students picked and looked at various pieces of art and different murals, and the project made them think about the history and the reasons behind why this art was created. And they wouldn't have thought about that, and I'm certain based on two students' experiences in real life, they wouldn't have thought about that without this project. So it was really interesting. Jonathan and Keenan picked a project and did something with Pablo Picasso. And then these next slides, these two, are actually from a retired married couple who were in their second semester with me. And they, before taking Spanish, they had traveled to Peru and actually saw this mural, the historic mural of Cusco, live in person. But at the time, they didn't think anything of it. They didn't think twice of it. It was just something on the wall, nothing so important. But you could see that they really took time. They studied it. They researched the history about it. And you will see here that they literally went out of their way and did a lot of homework on it. And they spent 30 minutes. They did a voice recording that was 30 minutes long on this presentation. And it was really fun to watch their presentation and to watch how well they did. And they analyzed every small section of the mural. So this was one where it says, this bridge shows a sophisticated travel and communication system in the Peruvian mountains. And so they analyzed it, and it was really great to watch. And then you think as a teacher, and you see this when you go to open and grade, it's really bittersweet, right? It's bitter because if you're me, you will listen to all 30 minutes of it, and you will provide feedback on every single second of what they've recorded. Especially when you know that there are students that are going to take the time and they're going to listen and read your feedback and work through it so that the next time they can apply it correctly. So I spent a lot of time grading this one. But the sweet part about it was not only did they enjoy it and it really made the art come to life for them because they had already experienced it, but it made me feel really good, and I learned things in the process, and I was so passionate because they were passionate. So it was really great to see how much they were learning and how much time and pride they took into doing this project. Okay. This is just a sample slide of the self-portrait along the borderline 1932 from Frida Kahlo. And this is from Andy and Hannah's presentation. And what they did was, this is the beginning portion where they actually talk about the actual artists themselves. When they study them, they talk about the history of what's going on in Mexico and the United States and all around the world, and perhaps why Frida Kahlo may have created, or why she did create, this piece of art. And so it was really great because not only did they focus on art, not only were they using Spanish, but they were also learning history at the end of the day. So it was really a great collaboration of different subjects that they were learning. And the most important part for me was, when they were learning this, it made sure that they better understood why a mural or a portrait was created, and just allowed them to better understand what was going on with real life occurrences at that time. Okay. At the end of the presentation, we asked each student to provide an answer to one or both of the essential questions. And Hannah stated in hers, in my opinion, I think art is very important. People show their emotions through art, and the world needs art. It gives it personality and color to life. And she was trying to say here, I think the world would be really boring without art. That grammar concept is a little bit above her level, but she still managed to get her point across that I understood what she was trying to say. And believe me, this was not one of the students thinking most critically. This was just an average one, I think. But it was great because they thought about it, and they really showed that they understood what we were asking of them and what art really does mean in somebody's life. Okay. This next slide that you'll see is from Grandia, and it was the Man of Fire mural. And I won't go into detail with it, but again, just to point out, the grammar is not perfect, but she got her message across really well. Grandia was one of the students who chose to work on her project individually, so she didn't have to collaborate and across over spring break from a distance. But she did spend a lot of time on the project and took a lot of pride in her work. And so that's one of them that I'd actually like to show you her presentation, so you can also see what a live Voicethread looks like. Let's see here. So this is the Voicethread screen that you should see, and this is the start of Grandia's presentation.
Alondra, can you bring up your volume a little bit?
Sure. Better.
Diego Rivera y David Alfredo Sinqueiros fueron amigos con Orozco. Su Muralism de Man of Fire es en Guadalajara, México, a la World Heritage Center. Orozco pintó realismo social. En el mural hay hombres nadando en el vórtice de fuego. Este mural puede significar ser atascado entre dos los mares. Durante la revolución, gente no tiene esperanza. Yo quiero que el mural esta la pone en el fuego, porque mucha gente harán asilo cuando necesitaron. Los hombres muriendo rápido. Quiero arte es muy importante y gente usar arte como una manera de expresar emociones.
So you can see from that actual presentation a few things. So Grandia was one of the ones that took a lot of time practicing and re-practicing her presentation. And you can see that because she did not speak using notes for the entire project. She really kind of, she did use some, but she was one of the ones that you can see practiced and re-practiced. And some teachers, I think, are in a way where they say, oh, well, they'll never have that opportunity with a native speaker to kind of repeat 20 times what they want to say. But this worked out great for them because they were able to practice, and even though it wasn't perfect for grammar or pronunciation, they learned a lot of new vocabulary. They practiced concepts for the preterite and imperfect that they had only learned and practiced for about 3 weeks before this project. And so it helped them to become more comfortable with what they were doing. The next slide, which hopefully everybody can still see it.
Somehow, I mean, is it just me or I don't see the slides anymore? I think we lost them. Do you mind resharing?
Can't see it
Yeah, let's see here.
Yep,
okay, there we go.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
And so on this slide, you can see these were the learning objectives that Margot and I really wanted students to accomplish or to achieve. I won't read them for you, but I will tell you that all of these learning goals, all 6, every student managed to achieve with this project. So at the end of the day, when that was done, we gave ourselves a big pat on the back because it was tough, but it was well worthwhile. And then, let's see, there we go. So how do we know? How do we know that these students achieved these goals and that they did what they needed to do? Well, we really saw that through the products that they submitted. Margot pointed out earlier that Google Doc that we used, and that is, it is such a great idea because students completed this project when they were on spring break. So Margot and I were able to kind of keep track, and every day we would log in and follow them and kind of see, are they completing the project? Are they working on it? Who is doing the work? Is it equitable, or is one person doing everything? I sent reminder emails to those students had fallen off the map, which you always get a few, and they managed to come back and get everything done. So that was great. We followed them step by step, and they selected a piece of artwork. They created those Google Slides. They used the grammar concepts that we were asking, which for Spanish, it was the preterite and imperfect. For this, the 2 past tenses. They uploaded those slides to Voicethread. They created the Voicethread recordings, just like you saw. And in that Voicethread, you may have also saw initials and comments from other students. That was the very end where we asked students then to go in and look at 2 other projects and comment thoughtfully and critically on what they watched. And that was a bonus because then they learned not only about their project, but they were able to learn about 2 other pieces of art, which was an extra. And thankfully, most of them followed all of the instructions, so it turned out great. I'm always afraid of student feedback. I don't know if you're like me, especially with my students. They are very critical, but Margot was kind enough to create a Google form asking for student feedback. These are 4 of the questions that we asked them, and the blue bar is strongly agree, and the orange is agree. And for the questions that we have here, and for all of them, an overwhelming majority of students for these questions either strongly agreed or agreed that the presentation on muralism helped them improve interpretive and presentational skills in Spanish. They all thought that the project was interesting and a worthwhile challenge, and they thought that the instructions and the learning goals were clear. I thought question 4 in particular was interesting because that was the question where we had the largest amount of students actually disagree on something. And that was whether or not they found it to the tech tools associated with the project valuable. And a lot of them said that they disagreed. And so I said, well, why is that? So in class, I just informally asked them, why do you believe that's the case? What's going on? And they told me it was because they never thought they would use any of these tools outside of class because other teachers don't require them to use it. So they said, you're the only teacher that makes us use any kind of technology. And I think to myself, oh, well, is that a disservice? And then I go back with myself and say, absolutely not. They're learning digital literacies. They're learning the right way to source things, to provide and to look at websites and determine whether it's accurate information. Because we know there's a lot, if you're on Facebook especially, of fake news. So it was really great to know that at least I'm doing that for them. And then we asked them just for feedback on Voicethread as a tool and if it's something they could envision using in other classes. Most of them did say no, they couldn't. A few of them had a hard time at first using Voicethread, but they managed to succeed over spring break without a lot of instruction from me. And the most interesting comment, which I can highly relate to, is that they said it takes some getting used to. The whole idea of showing our faces as we talked is a little weird. Absolutely. But I made students do that so that I knew that they actually practiced the project and they weren't just literally holding up a script and we couldn't see them reading. Not that it's awful necessarily that they were reading, because a lot of them did, but I knew that they had all practiced and re-recorded multiple times for a finished product. The other thing, as Margot mentioned earlier, is Voicethread is extremely flexible. So if you didn't want them to show the video portion, you can have them just record audio or just write little text messages, basically text boxes, where they can provide feedback, which is what I let students do when they were commenting on other projects. Overall, the project went really, really well. The final Google slide presentations and the voice threads were extremely impressive. And honestly, I thought, okay, I set a really high bar for my students and I expect them to go above and beyond and to do more than what I think they should do. But really, they set a higher bar and a higher standard with this project. They just went all out. And so the ones that will have me, which is most of them for the next semester, which is 201, they're in a lot of trouble because I now know what they're capable of. And so I'm going to push them even further to that next step, whether they like it or not. And also it was a great way to get them to reflect on art and how it affects our life while practicing grammar from the chapters that we had. There's always things that could have worked better. A few of them are just that I booked a computer lab weeks in advance when I knew I had to use some type of technology in our project. The night before, I was sent an email from the library saying they gave us a mobile laptop classroom instead. And unfortunately, none of the laptops connected to the internet. And during my presentation, the teacher station actually went down as well. An awful experience when everything you do is relying on technology that day. But Amazon actually went down that day, and a lot of other people were having trouble connecting and getting kicked off of the internet connections. So I'm not sure if there was just a glitch all over, but it definitely proved to be a challenge and possibly a small panic attack for me. Some students were really savvy and they have unlimited data on their phones, so they were able to connect their phones to a mobile hotspot or to connect the computers using a mobile hotspot from their phone. Not all of my students have that luxury, so we were kind of, squished around just a few computers. But students did become frustrated with the connectivity problems. So I had to change some of the stuff we did that they were going to use and work in small groups. Instead, we did a lot more as a class. I assigned a little bit of the project as extra credit, which actually the majority of students did with those Padlet questions. And then I assigned a lot of it over spring break. And that was just because the timing of our LGTC course didn't align with my course. So it just so happened to be that if we wanted to get it finished in time for the LGTC course to finish, we had to do it over spring break. It turned out okay. I have a really great group of students, so it was all right. But suggestions moving forward, things we would do differently. Familiarize your students with some of these tech tools before they do a major project, just so that they don't feel as overwhelmed with the technology. It actually would become a more invisible part of the project, and it would allow them to focus more on that project itself and completing the research and thinking critically. So you could do smaller classroom assignments, like using Voicethread to do an introduction discussion board type thing at the beginning of the year, something like that. If you can help it, don't assign all of the bulk of the work over a break. Sometimes we have people who like to procrastinate, and we have students who think that their partners will do all of the work. Google Slides and Google Docs prevents that, because you can actually see, if you go through the revisions, who actually wrote or completed what portions. So that's really great, because it holds every student accountable if you ever had doubts or questions. And I have had to use it. But for the most part, I was really fortunate. I've had a great group of students. So I wasn't forced to do any of that. And they did their work over break. But also have a better backup plan in case the internet does go down. I'm one that I went all along Google Slides. So perhaps, downloading my Google Slides to a PowerPoint, so I didn't have to stand up and kind of juggle and try and remember what I was going to say, or print out your slides. Maybe allow more class time on another day, just in case it doesn't work one day. Hopefully the second day it would work. But there's just a few. Despite all of the technical issues, students were really understanding. They adapted easily, and I was really afraid, especially because, I never know what students are going to think, and this project was not written into the syllabus. And so I think, oh my gosh, what are they going to say? They're going to flat out refuse to complete this project. They do have speaking and writing exams, so I counted this assignment as a speaking exam and a writing exam, and then gave some extra participation points along the way. And they liked it more than I thought, which was a great thing. I didn't get as much pushback as I expected in the class. And my final course evaluations, I was really nervous. Oh my gosh, they're going to say it was awful because of this project and that it was added in, and it was actually the opposite, which for me was really fulfilling. I had a few students that mentioned benefits of the project. One student said in her 2 years at the community college, it was the best project she ever completed. And then I had a few more that said they learned more from this project than completing the multiple choice and fill in the blank bookwork, which unfortunately we're forced to have a textbook. So I try to use it because they pay like $300 for it. But, it was more fulfilling and more worthwhile for them. So you have to find that balance, obviously. But I'm definitely going to do it again in the future because most of them loved it and I got great feedback for it. And I think now I'm going to go ahead and stop, and I will pass it back over to Margot for the last few slides.
Sorry, we are almost done. So, and I just want to go through these last three really quickly because
there are a few questions we want to make sure.
Yeah, because there are questions and we're getting close to our time. Yeah. So Edwige wanted us to talk very briefly about the collaboration. So you can see how far apart we are, but really, we were able to work very closely and very well together despite the distances with the technology and an awareness of the time change and when people might be sleeping and when people might be working. It worked out well. It's just that whoever the team members are, they have to be committed to working with each other and being able to anticipate. So it's really important that you're able to anticipate when the other person is overwhelmed. For example, we finished the tools course in late March, and Alondra was immediately starting another certificate course. And, you know, she has a regular teaching load plus 3 little kids. So at that point, my kids were going on spring break. So I was able to do the Google Slides for this presentation. And then a couple weeks after that, I started an intensive month-long course to become an ESL for adult teacher. And at that point, Alondra took over with the slides and kind of edited the script together. And this week we practiced together. It worked really, really well. We've gained a friendship out of it, and not just a collegial relationship between, you know, 2 Spanish teachers. And we anticipate collaborating more in the future. So I highly recommend it if you can find the right partner to do something like this. So I think our last screen, we have our email addresses on there in case, you know, you have a question, or for some reason, if one of the links doesn't work and you need access to one of the documents, we can either send it to you or reshare it. So I'm going to stop sharing and we can take questions. So somebody asked about the teacher prep time, and I think this is a really valuable question. So high school teacher with 5 classes to teach and 4 preps. And I can totally identify with that situation. Alondra, you might be better able to answer this than I am because you did it this spring.
Yeah, and I see you're referring to the actual teacher portion of it. I think that once you actually finalize and have adapted the project how you want it, it's not going to take a lot of time at all. The links remain the same. Everything would remain the same for you at the end of the day. For the next semester, for example, you would just have to clear out those comments or recreate a new voice thread. So it's not a lot of time at all. And the good thing about it is because it's already done and it's built in with that, you don't have to, you can do the same exact thing with 5 classes. And not everybody's presentation was 30 minutes because it was group work. They had, I think, most of them were kept like 5 to 10 minutes, somewhere in there, which wasn't bad at all to grade. It was actually easier than grading a ton of individual ones.
Can I jump in here just for 1 second, Alondra? Would you say that you could do the same project on a completely different topic, kind of using the same structure, and that, you know, once you've done it once you've worked out the kinks, once the students are used to the technology over the course of a school year, you could repeat this project using different topics multiple times, and the prep time would decrease every time because students would have familiarity with those tools.
Absolutely. I would agree with that. And I think that that's the nice thing about this is you can adapt it to match into your curriculum and whatever you're using. You just have to find something that you're interested in spending more time on and really focusing on as the topic. And then you could change it as you see fit.
Yeah, I totally hear you about the 5 classes and the 4 preps, though. I mean, this is something, when we did it, you know, we were doing it as part of a class, but I think for the first time you do it, if it's not exactly the same thing, I mean, we're going to share everything with you, but even at that, you know, you always have to adapt things that people share with you. So it's probably better to do it at a time when you're less stressed, if there is ever such a time. So then Luli asked about the grammar. So, you know, we really wanted them to narrate as much as possible in the past using preterite and as much as they could of the imperfect that they had learned. But that was the main grammar point.
I think that it's a great question. I think when I looked at these slides, a lot of them looks like it probably came through Google Translate. But it didn't. They used and they spent about 3 weeks on the preterite beforehand, you know, doing digital activities. Not all of it. I mean, it's a 12-week course, so it's pretty intense to cover 6 chapters. It's 2 chapters plus an assessment every 2 weeks. So we spent a little bit of time on it, and they do a lot of work at home with digital activities. So I can see where they did spend a lot of time, and what you see is actually their finished product of learning and practicing from the digital activities. We went from there as the basic, like fill in the blanks, up to this project. Now, if I wanted to take it further and I had more time, we could have spent more time doing editing or peer editing in the class. Unfortunately, we didn't have the time to align that with the LGTC course, so that they can autocorrect and self-evaluate themselves, and then go that one step further to really perfect it and narrow it and nail it down before an assessment. And do I have students come up with other projects, ideas, focus on history and art? This time we allowed them to just kind of pick something based on murals or the art that they chose. I do not always focus my projects on history and art. It just turned out that that was one of the chapter titles. It didn't align with this specific chapter, but it was an upcoming one. So I switched the cultural portions around so that it would align with what we had to cover in the class, what was in the text, and that would also align with this project.
And then somebody asked about Google Translate. You know, I think if they had used Google Translate, actually the writing would have been a lot better. Google Translate has gotten very good. Like overnight, it got much, much better. So,
I don't like my students to use Google Translate or any online translator. I am certain that there were students that did. And unfortunately, as a teacher, I've learned that you can't control everyone and see what everyone is going to do, especially when they're doing the bulk of the project at home. You definitely have your ideas. You know that student who's not doing really well in the class, but gives this perfect, grammatically correct presentation that maybe something's going on. But my philosophy is I don't like them to use it. We use word reference for dictionary for online, or they have a hand dictionary. So.
All right. Do we have, am I on mute? No. Do we have any more questions for Alondra and Margot? No? All right. If you do, you're welcome to email them. I want to thank them very much. This was really an outstanding project. I'm always I'm not reluctant to have students work in groups. It would be my preference to have all the students in the class work in groups, but the course being fully online, the teachers teaching all different levels, classes, and languages makes it a little bit difficult. And so I definitely put it out there as an option. All the projects and all the courses can be done in groups if the students want to. But this is the first time that that students took me up on this offer. Actually, Margot brought it up, and I thought it worked out great. We talked about the time commitment, and I think if you can find a teacher in your school with whom you work well, and that's really the key. You need to find somebody with whom you work well. I would definitely encourage you to try out those projects. And it's trying new technologies, trying new projects, I think is a little less intimidating when you're not doing it alone. So I think collaboration is great. Thank you, everybody. Alondra, go ahead.
If I can just add to that. So that was one thing with these classes that I've been taking through the program. I don't endorse anything that I don't love, but it has been really great because I found a lot of people that are now, and we all are so willing to share everything that we've done, that you get a lot of really great ideas. I think from this, we walked away from one class with like 16 different projects that we could adapt to make your own. So that's really helpful. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Merci, Catherine.
Merci à vous. Formidable.
And everybody, I hope you have a great weekend. I'm going to upload this to our YouTube channel, and I'll share the recording and the slides so that you can maybe review it or just kind of explore all the resources that Margot and Alondra have included. So I'm going to stop the recording now.